Okay, so now we will move on to the main presentation for today. So today is actually the International Day of people with, or not today, December 3rd is the International Day of People with Disabilities. And in honor of that, we are pleased to have speakers from a wonderful school called Brindavan that educates children with learning disabilities. So we are going to learn more about their programs. And so we have two speakers today that are going to introduce us to this special school. So Dr. Gayatri Krishna has a PhD in education and psychology from JNU and is the founder, trustee, and director at Brindavan Education. She has nurtured and guided Brindavan into becoming a premier center for teaching children with learning disabilities. Dynamism and compassion with a long-term focus on full commitment is her driving force. Janaki Narayanan holds a B.Ed in special education and an MA in social work. She works on spreading community awareness about learning difficulties and helps establish special resource rooms in mainstream schools wherever possible. As the parent of a special needs person, she can relate to some of the uncertainties and frustrations that parents of special needs children go through. Her personal mission statement is help a child with learning differences find their rightful place in society. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Janaki Narayan, who will go first. So over to you, Janaki.
Thank you so much, Malti. I think I will, can you hear me? Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes.
I'll just start sharing our slides first and then we'll go on to the talk.
Okay.
I'm going to request our coordinator to start sharing the slides. Malti, give me a minute.
And we can, if we can also have all the other participants turn off their video, that just helps with the quality of the PowerPoint that we shared.
You have to share the video, can all of us see the video here?
Yes.
Thank you. So thank you, Malati. And thanks to all of you for being here. I'm so happy to see this big turnout. Like Malati said, December 3rd is the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Most special educators like to say that these are people with different abilities. December 3rd is promoted by the United Nations as the day for the PWD. And thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk about special needs. Today, we will be talking about a very specific learning disability, which is an academic difficulty. And I will speak for the first 20 minutes, followed by our director and founder of Brindavan Education Trust, Dr. Gayatri Krishna. And let me start by first describing the picture you see on this slide. In our senior center, we have two centers. One is in J Nagar and one is in JP Nagar. In our senior center, once we had a fun day for the children, and we said, they can paint the walls. They can do whatever art and craft they want to depict whatever they felt. And one group of students put up this little craft work in front of the school. And I believe it represents all Brindavan stands for: diversity, acceptance, and inclusion. I felt that the inclusion is the arm just spread out to welcome everybody. The acceptance is people of varying shades. Can you see those paper streamers there in varying shades? And the diversity, of course, is the different sizes. So I think we stand for that. Can you go to the next slide, please? A parent's journey is always unplanned. And now I speak as a parent of a young adult now with special needs. But actually, when you have a child with special needs, that impact is so profound. All of us want our child not to be sick. We want our child to be in that, in that regular path that's very comfortable, it's very familiar. But when you have a child like this, then you learn along the way how to handle this. My child had specific learning difficulties, which is an academic difficulty. And when he went to regular school, we were told that he has to be in a special needs school. But me and the family and I learned to negotiate these challenges. And believe me, it was quite unexpected. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here we see a little depiction of the emotional journey of parents. I speak not only on my behalf, but I speak on behalf of all the parents I work with today. Brindavan does run a special course for parents of children with special needs to help them through. We also have a very strong parent support group. And together, when we parents talk about our emotional journey, this is something we want to talk about. One is the shock and the denial. It cannot be me. I'm so smart. How can I have a child with special needs? And then the next predictable thing, blame each other's family. It is your side of the family which has a problem. It is my side of the family. Those things do happen. Of course, it gets resolved. And then the belief that it will go away. Yes, sometimes we have had our elders tell us, everybody in the family spoke late. Everyone has kids. It's just not your child. Like that. So sometimes we have to, yes, that is true. Every child has different milestones, but it's better we also be aware that there is a chance that these children are likely to get learning difficulties and they might be at risk, and it's better we be aware and start some early intervention. Next is the anger. Your child, I have faced it, and I'm being honest, your child can be an embarrassment. When other parents are talking about all the fantastic things their child did in school or somewhere, you have actually nothing much to say, and you're worried. So there is anger, there is depression and detachment. That is the lowest point sometimes we parents go to. Because with that depression comes a lack of energy and some kind of helplessness. The best part comes with dialogue and bargaining, because that's when you start reaching out for help. When my child was detected with problems, that was in the early 90s. There was only the Spastic Society in Karnataka. There was another one in Margosa Road called the Developmental Center for Exceptional Children. And they guided us. And the best part was Brindavan came along in 93, because that's exactly where my child fitted in. Malti, I'm getting a little thing that somebody cannot see the screen. Can all of you see it? Can you check, please?
And can the rest of you, anyone else is not able to see, can you post? Everyone else is able to see? Let me just.
Yes.
Okay. So
Should I move on?
Who was it that, go on. Maybe Silla has a specific problem. I mean, maybe there's some issue with her. Let's see. Silla, okay.
No, I can hear clearly, Malati.
Okay. Okay, go on then.
Okay, thank you. Right. So I was telling you that Brindavan started in 1993, and that's when my child found a niche where he really belonged, and he was taught up to 10th standard there. After this is called the NIOS, National Open School, after which there was a place called Fame India in Jayanagar, which gave him some kind of vocational training. And after that, he went into inclusive employment with this wonderful company called Saskin in Domlur. He does small administrative duties. But what we also did was prepare him in a way to be able to take on some of those responsibilities. More than what he could do, I think the company was also very, very welcoming. So that was a big high for us. And he's been working 13 years there. And the acceptance is there. We have, our path laid out very beautifully. And there is a very meaningful life where we have all empowered ourselves. Sometimes parents do slip back. Recently, my child was unwell and, I did slip back, but we all come back with a lot of positivity. Next slide, please. So like I said, the parents' emotional journeys are evolving as they understand the child's situation. And every parent has got a unique story because by definition, learning difficulties is not homogeneous. It is heterogeneous, with each child having different issues. For parents, there will be despair. There will be many, many positive emotions. Like my child has only two states. He's either happy or very happy. And I've seen the family also react differently, each member taking this problem in a different way. Next slide, please. How I help myself. I learned about the difficulty. That is, awareness is the key. When you become aware, you also help yourself because you know exactly how to deal with the situation. So what I did was, I was working as a HR professional. I became a special educator. I did my B.Ed in special education. I started researching what are the resources available for my child. Like I told you, the places we found. Coping with the emotional and physical demands for caring for an individual with special needs, it can be overwhelming. But I always, I feel that we should never lose our fun element. All we need to do is spend some quality time with your child like you do with any other child, and you're always there the rest of the time. So I still follow a lot of my passions. There is a team of people you need to work with. Medical providers, therapists, school personnel, and yes, it involves a little bit of sacrifice of some time, and it does take a while, but you need all the people. Because we are working as a team here, we need all these people to see us through. I spoke about the inclusive employment we had to prepare a child for. And one thing is, you plan for 2 lifetimes. This is a book. It's a very useful book. It is written by a financial advisor. It says financial planning for families having children with special needs. And he told me you have to plan for 2 lifetimes, your lifetime and the lifetime of your child. So that's what we have done. We have created a trust for our child, and we have booked a villa in a gated community where he will be taken care of after our life. And roping in the family and society as part of the team is the key to success. Plus, we have learned to celebrate small successes. I know every parent of a special needs child has looked for, little things to be very, very happy about. So the mantra for me is celebrate small successes. Next slide, please. I'm going to slip into my role as a special educator now. And so who identifies their learning disabilities first? We've had parents tell us, oh, our child was doing wonderfully well till he came to school. So is the school the problem? Maybe, but we should also remember that learning disabilities is an academic difficulty. So the problems are really identified in school. So the teacher would tell us the child is difficult or fidgety, or there's no classwork or homework coming in. The child, is the child being lazy? Is the child being is misbehaving? And as special educators, we always tell them, is it possibly a learning difficulty? Think of that option also. Next slide, please. So let me just put this simply. Learning disabilities means the brain is wired differently. By definition, learning difficulties means the child comes from a good family environment. There's no problem there. There is good instruction in school. Have we lost a slide here? Anyway, let me finish this. There's good instruction in school, but the child is still not doing too well. And why is that happening? We need to question that. That's because the brain is also wired differently. There is something called the input. There's an integration. There's some processing and memory which is happening. If all these work in tandem, then the connectivity comes right. And a breakdown in any of these areas can learn to something called a learning difficulty. Yeah. So the brain is wired differently, and it's a lifelong condition. All we do is, we don't have a magic wand. All we do is, suppose you break your right arm, you do learn to write with your left arm. Exactly. We use the plasticity of the brain. That means we can, think of making new connections by teaching them differently, by using the preferred modality of the child. Is it a visual, auditory, kinesthetic, or tactile? We use the preferred modality and teach the child in the way he should be taught. Okay. So it's a lifelong condition, like I said, and we teach coping mechanisms. Next slide, please. Can we move to the next slide? Yeah, thanks. So this is the kind of problems we see in Brindavan Education Trust. There's some learning difficulties or disability, where there's a problem with reading and spelling, written expression. I will show you some examples. And the mechanics of writing, which is called dysgraphia, the actual mechanics of writing, the hook grip and everything. And the difficulty with math, which is called dyscalculia. And we do see children with borderline autism, where the child has a problem with social skills. We take them in because autism also affects learning, and it mimics part of it as a learning difficulty. Of course, along with it, the comorbidity would be attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We have noticed it's either a short attention span where the child is very distracted, or perseveration, just fixated on one task and just repeat it over and over. It could be a motor activity. It could be something verbal, and they're just not transitioning to the next activity, really. Next slide, please. But we don't like labels. We don't label any child. The only reason the labels are there is to indicate how the child can be helped and to help us develop something called the IEP, the Individualized Education Program, which is uniquely written for each child. And our larger purpose is, as a team, how do we help our children find their rightful place in society? And I can very proudly say that many of our children have found their niche in life, and some of them are, doing very well as chefs. Some of them are in theater. Some of them have started schools to help, other children with learning difficulties. All they need is some learning strategies to help them meet their potential. That is how we avoid the self-esteem issues, especially in the senior school where they are, either teenagers or young adults. They shouldn't get into behavioral difficulties or self-esteem problems. Next slide, please. So when I ask a child, what really happens? What happens when you read? Not all of them. Some of them say, this is how they, ma'am, you're asking me to read and this is how I see this. See, what is happening is they have very good eyesight. I mean, otherwise it's corrected. Their hearing, visual acuity and the hearing acuity is fine. They can hear fine, but they can see fine, but this is how they see it because of the processing issue. So the eye span is not complete. See, they're seeing the mid part of it. We can read a bit of it, right? Other perceptual tasks, the rest of it is very hazy. Next slide, please. I worked with a child who was 13 years old. Actually, he was the son of a policeman. I was very scared because the dad used to come every day and ask me, how is my child doing today? That is one more thing. We need time. We cannot be worried too much about the age. We need to give time for the child to work through his difficulties and then come out of his problems, and he will find his place. So this child was about 13 years old. He spoke a lot about Deepavali. So I said, why don't you write about it? But he did not write as much as he spoke. I took off the pressure. I said, just let's write just 5 lines. And this is what he came up with. You can see the difficulty with spelling and the content, the length, everything is simply not, when we check with his peers, this is not enough. Next slide, please. This is when we give a child's spelling. So on the right, you can see I have written the correct spellings. On the left side, this is what the child wrote. And the child told me that, especially with vowel sounds, A, E, I, O, U, he cannot hear the sounds distinctly, even though his hearing is perfect. He cannot hear it correctly. A sounds like E or I. So the maximum difficulty has come there for this child. Next slide, please. So overall, the characteristics of LD, of course, I did say one child spoke well, but there could be a problem there also. We saw the reversals. We saw the difficulties with the sound in spelling. Sometimes our children do not know to maintain the distance between individuals. They don't respect something called personal space. They are either coming really close to you. And we say 1 arm distance. That's because of their spatial issues. We see them bumping into chairs, highly disorganized. Their books are all over the place. The coordination issues. I give 3 instructions. Go to the room, pick up a book and give it to the other teacher. They would probably remember the first bit of it. I do not, maybe you feel that all kids do that anyway. And he would forget the rest of the instructions. We have seen children having impulsivity and explosive temper tantrums when they don't get their way. And we have noticed, especially during the pandemic, during the Zoom call, sometimes our children are so tired of this, not being able to sit with us and work with us personally. We are trying our best. Next slide, please. So what are we doing? What does a special educator do? Like I told you, we write the individualized education programs for each student. We believe in early identification before class 4, because that's when we can help our child. Explicit teaching, very, very clear structured teaching. We are trained specially for that. We use special methods. I told you how we use the plasticity of the brain to teach them new things. And the way we allow them to display their learning is where I think there's a difference. We allow them to display their learning in different ways because we need to know what they have understood. It need not always be a written, sit down with the writing, you write down all the answers exam. It could be a PPT. It could be just talking about it. It could be any which way they want to share their learning and show that they have understood. All the time we work toward including the child in mainstream. He belongs with the other children in regular schools, and we try to place them there. And it's only in very extreme cases they stay with us. Still they find their vocation and their niche somewhere. So the next slide, please. See how one of our children demonstrated learning through drawing. We taught him some things and he said, I can just doodle. And as I doodle, I will explain what I learned. I think he's done a pretty good job here. And we were very happy that he had understood most of what was taught. And what happens in NIOS is they do get scribes. They can, the scribe can write down what the child is saying. So if the child has difficulty writing, then some scribe will write down for him. They do get extra time, and there are several accommodations, not only in NIOS, in CBSE, in all the other streams also. Can we go to the next slide, please? So what is the role of the parent, the role of the special educator, and the role of the community? As a parent, my role is not to cure any disability. I just gave my child the social and emotional tools he needed, and he worked through his challenges. The special educators are making adaptations, and we are looking at the skill of the child to meet the appropriate educational goals. But as a community, for the child's future, we are looking at employability. We want our children also to be contributing members of society. They are very smart. So how can we build connectedness of our persons with special needs with our community? How do we spread awareness and acceptance? How can we remove these barriers to inclusion? And can we dig deep into our reservoir of kindness to accept people as they are? I'm going to stop here, and I will ask Gayatri to come in with the rest of the talk. Thank you. Gayatri?
Yeah. Thanks, Janki.
Yeah, next.
So basically, the journey that Janki described is has a big parallel to the journey that Vrindavan Center itself has gone through. It is so important for us to understand that part about, we are trying to talk about inclusion today. And if you look at it that way, in the long run, that should not even be a word in our, just like labeling and saying disability, inclusion also should not be a word in our lexicon. We just need to look at how everybody is a part of society, and whatever, there is a distinction made right in the UN Charter also, the distinction between having a medical model and a social model. We are nowhere close to the social model even today. So when Janki talks about the emotional journey of a parent, it is not at all difficult to visualize that, because there are millions of parents, especially now, you have to create awareness by saying World Disability Day. Why do we even need a World Disability Day on whatever, December 3rd or whatever? Why are we working so hard on saying that there is what you call mental illness, awareness about mental illness? Why does a Deepika Padukone have to be unwell to come and say, let's all talk about depression? So, we have a long way to go. Having said that, I have to tell you, the battle or the emotional journey that the parents are going through is something very, very hard to relate to unless you're a parent yourself at times. But it is happening. Slowly, there is a lot of awareness being created. Let me tell you that in our journey from 1993, the initial reason for setting up that school was my partner with whom I set up the center in fact, she died about 15 years ago. But when we started, she was already working in a mainstream school in a resource room. And she said she couldn't bear to see that the children even though there was a resource room in the school, there were lots of children who had more difficult, who were in a more difficult situation, who were actually told to leave the school, even though there was a support system in the school. So that was the main reason we started. And we said, okay, let's set up the center and say children with severe difficulties also we will support to the best of our capability. And when you look at the basic definition of a child with learning difficulties, you have to understand that cognitive capabilities are very high. It is that they have a problem with the neurological perceptive sort of processes so that they have a lot of difficulty in picking up the skills of reading, writing, spelling, even math. And that is where they sort of start failing. And their failure is eventually the result not of their capability, but a result of not having been supported. So that was the reason Vrindavan was set up. So historically speaking, institutions need to continue from where parents are working. Not every parent can become a full-time educator for their child, right? So nowadays you see more and more, especially with the COVID and working from home and parents having to, participate a lot more in their children's education. And even earlier, like Janaki was saying earlier, the numbers are so great in each classroom. It is not possible for every teacher to be trained at that level, or for every teacher to say, I will take care of every child in my classroom all by myself, without having recourse to either support in the classroom by another adult or not having access to material, which is again a very thing. And we are so, especially in our Indian system, we are so fixated on syllabus, not even curriculum, fixated on the syllabus. So to reach that point where every child will reach that point of saying get an A grade or a B grade or even a C grade, oftentimes the child with learning difficulties is just left behind. So I am very happy to say that the current national education policy that has just been brought out in 2020, just a few months ago, talks about early intervention and talks about early childhood education. This was not even under consideration. Every time we always say you cannot identify a child with learning difficulties unless they are 7+ years old, because that is when the skills of reading, writing, and math is supposed to, the picking up of those skills is supposed to start. But we can't deny that these signs of children at risk are seen from a very early age. And till the child is 9 or 10, our earliest intervention program at Vrindavan started even till a few years ago. We would only admit children at the age of 9+, because that is when the child would show, major lag in between potential and performance. So the new NEP is laying out very well now, and has said that early childhood education has to be looked at. And awareness is very high at this point, because obviously everybody is talking about the NEP. Though awareness is high, the commitment to inclusion is still very, very low, and it will be very difficult to implement. It's not happened in the last, since independence. Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan has been in place for so long. Institutions have to invest both in terms of hard resources, in terms of soft resources, in terms of time, and they have to invest in a lot of patience. So, as I said, the niche areas are covered in small ways by, some schools. Now more and more schools are setting up resource rooms. So the niche area is in terms of how many children every resource room can accommodate. Vrindavan itself, over the last 20 years, we've set up resource rooms in 20-25 schools. But I have to tell you, we started, our very first resource room was set up in 1994. But I can tell you, and Janki has been in charge, we used to go every week, train the teachers, identify the children, develop an IEP, handhold the teachers, help them to make worksheets, help them to implement. She went to this school for a total of 5 years before we said, okay, now you can be independent. But I can tell you that out of the 25 schools that we set up, maybe 5 schools at this point have a good program going. All the others would have, either the teachers left or the management changed or commitment changed, whatever it is. So niche areas are still being covered in a small way, but scalability is still very much of an issue. Hopefully with the new NEP, I can tell you, I love what's written on the paper, but we'll have to wait and see how it gets implemented. The next slide, please, Jayanti. So as I said, the inclusion of the early childhood education, that is the ECE, it is very promising because, as I said, the children who develop a specific learning difficulty at a later stage, at the age of 6, 7, 8, when you start identifying that they're having problems with picking up skills, the skills of reading, writing, and spelling and math, and arithmetic, not math. So we don't realize that this should start right at the age of the 5 part. That is at the age of 3+. So 3 to 8, that is the 5 years. So the new national education policy talks about including this. And these are the earlier we intervene, the better it is. And like Janaki was saying earlier, it's not like you wait till the child develops speech at 5 years to intervene. That is absolutely the wrong way to go about it. So we would love to have teachers who are trained to identify children at risk. And if we start the intervention right there, especially for the type of children that we are working with, the children with specific learning difficulties, if we start the intervention earlier, the gap is likely to be much smaller and therefore much more easily covered. Okay. So as I said, again, major requirement is in the area of teacher training and resource access. And of course, it's a lot of patience. It's not social service. This is what I keep telling people who come and say, oh, you must be doing a good job with your school. You must need a lot of patience. Can I come and volunteer? So I have to tell them, I'm sorry, but this is not social service in that sense. It has to be a commitment from everybody. We would love to have people who want to contribute a little bit of their time to be involved in advocacy. That would be a wonderful, that is where we need them. But that again is because they are committed to the idea of, saying that all these children have to be brought into the mainstream. In the new national education policy, there's no reference to budget allocation. That is standard. And access to accommodation special needs is not directly addressed in the new NEP. But it only gives a link to the RPWD Act. That RPWD Act originally was in 2006 with about 7 disabilities. But now in 2016, it has included autism, it has included specific learning difficulties, it has included cerebral palsy, it has included about 21 different categories. So good laws passed, but how it is to be implemented is a lot to do with how much budgetary allocation is done, and not just that, how the private sector responds to it. Because I think if we look at it from a point of or a perspective of saying that we are in it for profit, inclusion is not going to happen. Next, please. So I've already talked about this. Timelines have talked about inclusion. The minimal levels of learning, that is the MLL, was set up by NEPA in 1989, which clearly stated that even in the first grade level, the child should be able to develop these skills. But as I said, I think we depended a lot. If you look at the NCERT textbooks, they are very well graded. But then again, the teachers are not trained to implement it. And we should not forget that all said and done, 99% of the schools, private sector definitely, or English medium schools. And English is definitely our second language. And at this point, 50 years down the line, I have to say quite a bit of the language development, even for teachers, has been diluted quite a bit. So now distinctions have not been made in terms of what is to be supplied or done by the CBSE, IC, or the state board. Accommodations are not to all the boards. They're very, very subjective. And it is very much a question of how aware you will be or you can be in terms of making use of these accommodations. Next, please. I'll very briefly tell you why we are this slide. It is purely because this is the changing scenario that we have experienced from 93 right up till today. When we just set up for children with learning difficulties, it was very nice for us because we would get all children who were under the category or diagnosed under the category of specific learning difficulties. So the progress we could make was a tremendous amount of progress. But as time passed, we realized that children who were in the mainstream school needed support. So we took them on, and then we started the parent support group because we thought that without the involvement of the parents, we could not have managed anything. Then we had to establish different centers because the numbers of children who were coming into Brindavan were growing, and we couldn't handle it in one space. Next, please. And the profile of the child changed. The child was, and as awareness was created, many more schools started doing, giving some amount of support in the resource rooms. And many schools started setting up resource rooms. So, and with the accommodations given by the different boards, lots of people came and made use of those accommodations. So fewer children, specific learning difficulties, just like the autism spectrum disorders, are all on a continuum. You have it, they're very much in a continuum. You have mild, moderate, and severe difficulties. So the children with mild and moderate difficulties, more and more of them started to be taken care of in the resource rooms in the schools, which is an excellent thing, which is what we were identifying and which is what we wanted to happen. And which is the reason why we started setting up the resource rooms in the first place. But then the profile of the child within the institution at Brindavan changed from being a child purely with specific learning difficulties to include children who are high functioning on the autism spectrum and children who had very severe attention deficit and hyperactivity disorders. And again, later on, it turned out that many of these were not even able to complete schooling, even though the cognitive capabilities were more than adequate. So then, which is why a couple of years ago, we started what was called a pre-vocational training center, because these 14 and 15-year-olds, they had no place to go because they wouldn't have completed their schooling or gotten their certification, or possibly even would not have been able to get their certification in terms of formal SSLC or a CBSE board or a 10th grade or whatever. And we started exploring what could be an option for them. So we have started what is called a pre-vocational training program, which will give them all the skills required to enter a vocational program at the age of 18 or 19. So from 14 to 18, instead of focusing on getting them to do board certs, we get them to do a lot of life skills and functional skills, a lot of digital literacy, which is absolutely, it's just something everyone has to have nowadays. So we have started doing that sort of work in the last 2 years. So it's not just, so the reason I'm saying this is for any school or for any mainstream school to be able to say, I am truly inclusive, then they need to have extreme levels of adaptability and flexibility and accommodation made, not just to the child's requirements. The whole program has to develop around these type of requirements. It should be flexible enough to be able to accommodate the type of child who is either on the autism spectrum or has a specific learning difficulty or has hyperactivity and impulsivity problems, any of those issues. And let me tell you again here, even this, we are not being truly inclusive because we are looking at it from a child who has those cognitive capabilities and can be trained to be productive at some point, to be job ready, to be employable at some point. So at least at that level, I think the whole population that we're working with, we need to understand that we have to define what is the population we're working with and try to make the best, give them the best possible opportunities. Next, please. So basically, as I said, it's not just what has worked for us. This is what we would want everyone who's working in the field to do. Reskilling, keep the pedagogy updated, keep the learning goals relevant. When I talk about keeping pedagogy updated, I can tell you we had to do a dramatic change in terms of how we were doing our teaching once COVID set in. We thought, okay, it's for 1 or 2 months. Then we thought 3 months. Then it became 6 months. Now it's become a whole year. So we've had to translate all of our teaching learning activities into being online. Okay, so that is the sort of and I think most people have realized that that is the way to go forward, that sort of a change, that sort of dramatic change is what you have to do. Using technology, using digitization, using, what is currently available. There is a lot that is lost in not having face-to-face interactions, but still this is where we are now and we need to have that. And the level of flexibility, scope and reach is not perhaps possible for mainstream school, because even today we see, I have a niece who's working in a mainstream school. She says her classes are clubbed. So she has about 80 children in one session. There's no way she can pay any sort of individual attention. Whereas we have 8 children and we can put them in breakout rooms and even do one-on-one work. So I don't see how it can be applied in a, in a large way in making this reach absolutely possible. But the positive here is that integration is happening in bits and bytes. So I hope this will continue, and hope at some point with the new national education policy that things will get better. Next slide, please. So a good reflection of how rapidly we need to change. As I said, I just talked about this today. Another major plus for us is, for the last 10, 15 years, we've all been running around saying, document, 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 whatever your plan. You guys are doing such a good job. So now we find that so much documentation is happening. It's actually making our work so much easier. So access to resource, I hope that the national education policy focuses on access to resource. The one example, I have traveled a lot and have seen that even in the US, there's a lot of issues with identifying and providing enough support for children with learning difficulties and other types of, academic or other difficulties. I have found that in UK, they have a ministry. It's called Special Education Needs, as SEN, and access to resource, the whole ministry develops material. We have NEPA and NCRT here who are more than capable of doing that. So I hope in the national education policy, there will be a lot of funding given for resource development, because especially for every grade level, we need differentiated material. And if we have teachers have access to that, it'll be so much easier for them to take it and give it, instead of saying each one of you develop different types of material for a different group of children. So the positives to keep on when we get back to the needed social and physical and interaction space. Definitely we should continue to have blended learning, because access to resources is so much easier when it comes to accessing it through the web. And I just have to say that, as Janki said, it has been an emotional journey, not just for Brindavan, but for any parent who has been through this journey. Roping in society is very much a part of what we want to do. 1,000 times failures is what, like dying 1,000 deaths. This is the journey that the parents go through. And frankly, this is the journey that we go through with the parents as well. But the positive here again is that when you look at the success rate, all of us have reached this point. So our success rate is 100%. So that's what we are looking at. I think that's it. Any
Thank
slides?
you. Thank you so much. So now we will, move on to the Q&A part of it. So I see already some questions have been posted. Is there any more that you were going to go through, or?
No, this is the last slide.
Okay,
Basically,
yes. So let's,
I think we have some contact details here, Malti.
Okay. Yeah. And if, after the talk to, if anyone is interested, I can certainly, we can forward this information on. I can post that in the group. And so thank you so much, both of you, Janaki and Gayatri. So we will now, and I see a few questions have already been posted. And if anyone else has other questions, please do post on the chat page. So one question is, how many years on average does a special needs child need in the school or course designed for him to be able to function in the society as best as he can?
That's a very big question. there is no fixed number of years. We've had children who've been with us from the age of 8, 9, 10, and completed school at 15 and 16. And as Janki was mentioning earlier, earlier in the 90s, in the early 2000 years, we were only taking children with specific learning difficulties. So they've all moved on to become lawyers, and many of them have done hotel management and BCom and MA and MSc and all that. But the profile of the change that we have now has changed. So they're not able to manage all those things as easily. They're not able to manage the formal curriculum, and so these children will need to be trained in many other ways. They need to be given a lot of functional skill training so as to reach a vocational model and be able to succeed in that area. And we've been able to place some children also in, recently also we've been placing them in a couple of organizations like Fame India and Antarbhava, all these places which take children to train them for life employability. It can be, if it's just a specific learning difficulty, a reading writing program, if there's a gap of 2-3 years, it will take us about 3-4 years for them to reach that level.
And once they are posted in a position, is there any sort of continuous kind of help offered to them?
See, this is the thing that we've just sort of signed up with a couple of organizations. One of them is by one of the big IT companies which have set up things. Their thing is to hold hands for the child who's placed for 5 years after they join the job. This, of course, requires 100% commitment from the parents as well, right? Because they are invested in it as well. But then 5 years is the minimum that you do, because then you have to make sure that the first 1 or 2 years, they're not even used to sitting in one place and doing some job for 3 or 4 hours. And here the companies will require them to sit for 8 hours and 10 hours. And they really need to be able to accept the responsibility for that type of responsibility. About 5 years is my expectation. So till they're about 25.
Okay. Let's see. Must be terribly frustrating for parents dealing with all the problems involved. How does one cope with these frustrations and feelings of helplessness?
Yeah.
Your question.
Janki, yes.
Yes. I did tell you that, there is, ultimately, at the end of the day, you end up being a better person. At least it happened to me. I met the best kind of people when I moved into special education. We have a lot of fun. And once the acceptance is there, all you see is positive things. They are such fun. Our children are such fun to be with. The reason is also because they're thinking out of the box. They will tell you things no other child will be able to think like that. Generally, if you just expand your mind and just accept, the fun element does come in. And frankly, other than when all the support systems came in, and frankly in Bangalore, there's big support systems available today. As long as there's a strong parent support group, like we have in our own Vrindavan, we are all doing fine. And it's very sweet of the person to ask that. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay. Has any family been able to get life or health insurance for a special person?
Can I take that?
Yes.
Yeah. My son is in an inclusive employment. The policy of that particular company is to give insurance. And that is valid as long as he's there in that company. When we approach the general insurance companies, I don't think there is anything specified for learning disabilities and autism. They're not at all clear. 2 of them did say that they are working to get some things for our children also. As of date, no. We have set up our own trust with our own funds. I did mention that we plan for 2 lifetimes for me and my son.
And now I saw that there's some sort of accommodations that some of these centralized testing programs offer. What are the types of accommodation? Is it just extra time for these, students with special needs?
Yeah. There is exemption from 2nd and 3rd language from the CBSE board. The state board has also given exemption for 2nd language and 3rd language. And then there is extra time given in case a child has dyspraxia or dysgraphia, then if it is, he can get a scribe, so where he can dictate. Extra time is given, computer support is given, they can use calculators, and there are many, and each of it is different to each board. And then, especially now in the last few years, you can drop math and science because many of our children find it difficult to manage the CBSE board level or the ICSE board level math and science, or even in the SSLC level. So they can drop those subjects and take alternate subjects. They can do either, music or carpentry in the ICSE board, or they can do philosophy, social science, and economics in the other boards. The best of all of it is, of course, the National Open School. You can just take any 5 of an offer of 14, 15 subjects.
Can I ask a question, please? I'm Silla Gandhi. I also have a special child. He's not been able to go to school, or he knows just basic education. He has worked in several places. The thing is that as the child grows older and the parents grow older, you worry about some kind of insurance or something for their health. And I have battled for the last 5 years to try and get some kind of health or life insurance for my son. And even though the government of India has passed a ruling that they cannot be denied it, there is not a single insurance company that's willing to take it. So have you any idea how I can, who I could approach?
Silla, we have been in touch with 2 companies. They haven't given us very concrete answers, but the minute I'm in touch with them and the minute something works out, I'll definitely be in touch with you. And,
But are you talking of insurance companies?
Yes.
Okay. I'd really be interested to know, because I must have tried at least 5 different ones.
Okay.
And the government has passed a ruling that these a special adult cannot be denied insurance.
Yeah, the RPWD Act says that also. But most of the time is now lawyers advising you to set up trusts. And,
But trust is not the only answer,
it is not, but and it's not easy.
Everybody can't set up a trust.
No, this is very true. But so far, most of our parents have been having issues with that.
Okay, thanks.
We'll definitely stay in touch and give you the information when we come across something.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, then the comments. As parent of a child with Asperger's autism, I feel that not only has the differently able person learned to function within the society, but also the society to accept persons with different abilities. I think the society still has a long way to go.
Yeah.
That is a very true statement, that awareness that needs to be, come within the society is still a big work in progress. So anyway, we are a little past 12 o'clock. Thank you so much for this enlightening and very interesting talk. Thank you for taking the time, to Gayatri and Janaki for coming in and speaking with us. I'll certainly pass on the information if the group is interested later on. But, if there isn't anything else, I think we can wrap up this call and this talk, and wishing you all a very good day. Bye.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting talk, and you've had many years of experience, so it was very interesting to listen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now.
And I heard you were at the beach.
Put it on speaker.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank
you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. It was really interesting.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. It was really fantastic. Really very, very good. Thank you.